I'll just say myself, right?
Yeah, go.
Just everything happens for a reason. That's the way I take it. Maybe he wasn't ready, to have his tenure in Colorado. You know what I mean? Like, it's, when I say that, I mean all the respect in the world to anybody that was involved, whether it was players or management or he comes in and you got to remember it was Avalanche 1.0, right, which we always refer to, and then it kind of got stripped down to the rebuild, right, so to speak, and we youngest team in the league and lowest payroll in the league, and I was part of those years there, with a thin front office staff that we had, and it was wearing on you because it was so different than what we were used to. You know what I mean? Because the Avalanche were the mecca, right, of the NHL, and it was for that decade of success they had, and then you go in there, and then Joe comes in there, and Patrick comes in there, and then the shine is back, right, and it was so crazy if you remember, like people were so excited, and he was excited, and you got to remember he had stopped playing, and he was such a warrior competitor. We don't need to go back to the accomplishments, but Patty's a worker. And Patty owned that junior team, and I'm from there, so I can tell people, and even the listeners, like, it's amazing what they did with that franchise in juniors. It's amazing from the ownership standpoint to obviously winning the Mem Cup back then. You're talking about this past spring was the second one, right? Yeah. So we're talking about Patty's a worker. Patty didn't mind getting on the bus and 15-hour bus rides with the young, players, and it was never like, I'm Patrick. Well, I don't drive the bus. I will meet you guys there. You know what I mean? And he just loves the game. And I remember when he was playing here too. Like when I was his teammate, he was always in the coaches' offices, and it wasn't about talking about the team itself, because I think he knew there was a barrier too. Like, hey, we're all teammates and there's coaches, but he was in there every day, like learning drills to whatever it's Crawford or Hartley or whatever, and it's about his son's teams, because he would love going to practice at night, and you just go be a coach on the ice for those kids in Littleton, and so he's always had that passion to coach and the passion for the game. So he comes in here, he's the coach, Joe's there, they have a great first year in the standings, right? Well, Varley was awesome, the shine was back, and then they go and get some older players, like you were just saying, and it maybe wasn't the right time. After we had stripped it down, when I say we, because I was part of it, and then maybe it wasn't the right time to jump into, right? And then you do that, those players that you get in there, Jerome McGinley, or again, Hall of Famer, I'm not that, it just wasn't the right mix, I think, going back, and you were covering on a daily basis, you would have a better answer to me than that. But what happens is then you see that you have the dual title, I think was a mistake. That if I go back to it, and you got to remember back then, Daryl Sutter was one of the last ones that had it, right? You know what I mean? And the NHL evolved so much as a business over probably right around that time that it was probably too much. And then you go in there, and then maybe there's characters that you don't really associate with on the ice, meaning on some of the players. Let's say it's Matt Duchene or whatever it is, right? I mean, we all know the example of when he talked about Dutchie when he scored his 30th, and probably wasn't his. That's not what I want. That's not how I want to be the coach of these types of players. And then when you have that dual title, then you feel that you're well, I have my say in this, and then, you got to remember, one of the greatest throughout all this chaos, a gentleman by the name of Chris McFarland got hired, which probably ended up being one of the greatest hires in Avs history.
Turned out pretty well.
No, I'm being honest, like, you know what I mean, and probably not even realizing it that they needed that, and then Chris ends up being like, awesome nowadays because we all relate to him now because he is the man in charge, But you got to remember he came in at that time because there's a little bit of a chaos. And so if I go back to it, and then Patty, I think it's well documented last year. He came out last summer, and, he went public and said it. A, I made a mistake in Colorado. The way I left is not the way you do things. And he was man enough to say it. B, he was man enough to say that it was too much. The NHL nowadays, to be a coach and be involved in the front office, it probably doesn't make sense. There's too much work involved, and now he realizes it. I think he was at a time and place in his life that, the way he exited was wrong. He goes back to juniors because that's, what he does. And he's like, I'm going to go back. And I think he thought it ended up being way longer than he thought or expected to be. I don't think he expected to be 7-8 years, right? Because I am Patrick Waugh, right? And he is. He's got a presence. And I tell you all the time, I play with a lot of guys. You want to go win one game, that's my guy. Of all the guys I play with, that's my guy. Because he is a winner. And he can be nuts about it at times, right? Just overbearing about winning. And so I don't think he thought it was going to take that long. And I think what he did last year was, I think he told himself, this is going to be my last year in juniors. They went out on top. They were outstanding. He changed his philosophy a little bit towards youth and adapting to today's generation, and he's always surrounded himself with good, like you said, with good staff, even in juniors. I mean, those guys are all working in hockey, and then all of a sudden he thinks there's going to be some openings, and then boom, again, there's no openings. You know what I mean? Meaning, sorry, there are openings. He's not the selected one. And that's tough on your ego. And I think that, obviously, I haven't spent some time at the Hall of Fame there a few months ago with him. I was shocked. I mean, because we talked, and I'm like, I can't believe this team didn't call you. I can't believe this. You're not even like in the running there, or and I could feel like that he was disappointed, and I think he had just kind of said, okay, I'm going to take the year to go to Florida and play golf, and just kind of, wait and see where this thing goes, and if it ever comes back, then I'll be very disappointed if it never works out. But I remember him telling me, like, all I want is another chance to show that the way I went out, it was wrong. You know what I mean? And I'd like a mulligan, because he loves golf, right? He goes, I'd like a mulligan. I think I can do better. I think I've learned. And he looked very at peace, honestly, because this is a guy that I spent a lot of my childhood with, and because he was my dad's client, for if anybody listening is not aware of that, and then obviously their relationship with the Avalanche. But this is a guy that does well when he has a mentor. And I'm not going to be emotional here, but my dad was his mentor. Forget about his parents and, great people. My dad was his mentor, like, for hockey. And when I tell you that, like, it's living down the street from one another. It's talking to each other every day. And it was a partnership. And my dad was an older gentleman compared to him, right? So it was more like he always respected that authority. You know what I mean? And he always felt that it was a good crutch for him. You know what I mean? And he felt good, because to be that powerful mentally, like, sometimes it's a little bit much, as we saw his exit from here, and if you don't have your crutches, sometimes it can make you make a wrong move. And as much as this reminds me so much of his relationship with my dad, because Lou is very similar to my dad, and that's why those two got along really well. And now I think that Lou Lamoriello with him is something that he was accustomed to for 20 plus years, you know what I mean, on a daily basis with his life and his mentorship as a player, and then as a as a coach, and you know what I mean, and as a father, as a parent, as anything you want, you know what I mean. And I think he's found it this time, and I think he knows that he's not trying to be anything else than a coach, and I think it's gonna be successful. And I think if you saw it in the last couple of days, the National Hockey League is a better league with Patrick Waugh in it. There's no doubt about it. He is a character. He is he is something that people relate to, or you know what I mean, and they want to see, and it's because of all the things that he's won and everything. So I think it's awesome he's back. I think it's gonna work the way it's set up. And right now you should see the Montreal, like he's in there Thursday night. He's actually playing the Canadiens Thursday. It is absolutely crazy. I mean, The broadcast was shifted in Quebec. They sent a real crew to the game last night. They did the game live. I mean, it's not. I mean, he is an icon in the National Hockey League, but he's also almost a cult hero, like in Quebec and Montreal, and it's polarizing at time too. You know, you don't like him. So I think it's great. I think that he's learned a lot. I think he's grown up a lot, and I sure am proud that he's back.